Thanks so much. Thank you. Well, thanks very much for the introduction. Thanks everybody for being here. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. Oh yeah, better. Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks. Can you all understand the southern accent all right? All right?
Way south.
Way. This is Penguin South, okay? Well, look, people ask me all the time, you know, why I would care about the United States. And I say it's very simple. The first reason is gratitude. You know, my country was facing invasion by the Japanese during World War II. And if it hadn't been for the sacrifice of your fathers and uncles and grandfathers at the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway, we would have been done, folks. And that's very, very powerful memory in my country today. The second reason is related, but it's a little more selfish. You know, Ronald Reagan had it right. This is the last best hope of mankind. If you should ever lose your constitution, your liberty, your economic dynamism, and your military superiority, all of which took a huge trashing through the Obama years, had that trend continued, folks, we'd soon be living in a world run out of Moscow and Beijing and Tehran and Havana. And is that the kind of world you'd like to hand on to your children, folks? No. So anybody who cares about liberty has to care about the United States. My big deal is national security. Because if you cannot secure your house or your family or your business or your country, what do you really have? You have nothing. Your founding fathers were very wise to give you a Second Amendment to protect what you had. And if they hadn't done that, I'm sure you'd have nothing by now. And I'm sure there's a lot of, a lot of military people in the room today, or ex-military, who have taken that famous oath to defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And which are actually the more dangerous, folks? The foreign enemies or the domestic enemies? And how much, every year, every day, you send your brave sons and daughters overseas to fight those horrible foreign enemies. And every single day, they are being betrayed by your people in Congress behind their backs. If you're going to send people overseas to fight your wars, folks, don't you owe it to them to elect people who are going to have their back and not be betraying them, as has been happening ever since World War II, pretty much. So, has anybody in the room ever had to undergo any form of FBI background check or security check for a government position? Okay, 3 or 4. Did you pass, Bob? You did? Oh, okay. Congratulations. Well, is it true those background checks can be extremely rigorous? They check out your family background, your overseas travel, criminal convictions. They even look for things like bounce checks. They want to know you're a trustworthy individual and will serve and protect the Constitution. Because one traitor can cost you your country, folks. You imagine had Benedict Arnold been successful when he tried to betray George Washington, how different your history may have been.
The way that they caught the person with the notes about that
was
just by the grace of God.
That was by the grace of God. There was so many things by the grace of God in that revolution. It was. So the point is this. So you're a young Marxist radical, like Al Green, for instance, who hangs, I forgot, there's quite a few of them in this town, AOC. You hang around with the local communists or the local Muslim Brotherhood. They get you elected to Congress, where you may serve on the Homeland Security Committee or the Armed Services Committee or even the Intelligence Committee. How much of an FBI background check do you need for that one, folks? Zero. Nothing at all. There are no background checks in any committee in Congress. Do you think maybe the Iranians know about this? Yeah. Or the Cubans? Yeah. Or the Chinese? Or the Venezuelans? But surely they wouldn't try and exploit it against you, would they? That would be unethical, would it not? Well, there are no background checks in Congress, and there's no media scrutiny if you're on the left. You can get away with almost anything if you're on the left. But don't worry, there is a last line of defense to keep communists and socialists and terrorists and spies out of your government. That is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Why do I detect some cynical laughing from some people? Well, look, 10 years ago, you would have said, great, we've got the FBI. Now we've understood that the deep state penetrates right through the top of the Justice Department, the FBI, right into Congress. And we understand that the FBI, far from protecting us, is actually working with our enemies in many instances. Not to disrespect the many loyal FBI officers in this country, but you've got to understand the top reaches of that organization are rotten. I think we all acknowledge one of Trump's biggest mistakes he made when assuming office was not to replace the leadership of those agencies. I don't think he's going to make that mistake should he get re-elected, folks. So the FBI, so this is how it's supposed to work. The FBI is supposed to catch traitors, and the Justice Department is supposed to prosecute them. Well, how's that been working out in recent times? Not so good. And those two committees, those two organizations, are overseen by the Judiciary Committee, the most powerful committee in your Congress. Now, for many years, that was headed by a man called John Conyers from Michigan. Who remembers old John, right? He was in Congress 140, 160 years, apparently. But that man would have been one of the worst traitors to ever serve in the US Congress. He was the man who abolished your House Un-American Activities Committee. He basically put Larry McDonald, the former president of the John Birch Society, out of a job. John Conyers had a 50-year history with the Communist Party USA. 40 years with Democratic Socialists of America, which is worse than the Communist Party USA. 30 years with the Workers' World Party, which supports North Korea and Cuba and Iran, and was a big-time supporter of several Muslim Brotherhood front groups. And you can see it in my movie here. You don't have to believe me. John Conyers, when some of your congressmen tried to get the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the father of Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS, but works legally in America, when he tried to get them designated as a terrorist organization, John Conyers protested, "No, they are a peaceful social service agency now. We should work with them, not against them." John Conyers was a hardcore anti-American Marxist-Leninist. Yet for 40 years, he oversaw the FBI and the Justice Department. Also on that committee until recent times was a woman called Judy Chu from the San Gabriel Valley of California, a long-time supporter of the Communist Workers' Party, a pro-Chinese militant group. And you should see Judy Chu. Check her out on C-SPAN. When the FBI actually gets round to arresting one of the more than 25,000 Chinese spies working in this country, including a whole bunch in Houston, she gets up and says, "You are racist. You're a racist organization. You're only persecuting these people because you hate Asians." And she has arranged for sensitivity training for these cruel FBI agents so they don't persecute these poor Chinese spies. Another example, Andre Carson from Indiana. Andre Carson from Indiana, one of your 3 Muslim members of Congress, big-time Muslim Brotherhood supporter, big-time Marxist. We've got him again on my movie. gets up in front of a Muslim Brotherhood convention in Connecticut in 2012. He's got a big grin on his face. Hey guys, I've been told there are some spies here today. There's some people in the audience undercover. They're checking us out. They're spying on us because they believe we are here plotting to destroy this country. Well, I say to you people undercover, Allah will not allow you to stop us. This man currently serves on the Intelligence Committee, folks, overseeing the FBI, the CIA, the DEA, NSA, you name it, he oversees it. But the head of the Judiciary Committee, because Sean Hannity's been a bit upset lately because you got a socialist in Congress, Ocasio-Cortez. How could this possibly happen? She's a member of Democratic Socialists of America. Well, the head of the Judiciary Committee, a man called Jerry Nadler, who tried to impeach your president, has been an active member or supporter of Democratic Socialists of America since at least 1977. The man is a Marxist, folks, and nobody calls him on it. People, right now, your FBI is out there trying to track down the people who've been looting and burning your cities. These people are Jerry Nadler's friends. The FBI is trying to track down their boss's friends. You think that might discourage them a little bit? See, there's at least 100 members of your house, including what's her name from your, well, obviously Al Green, but Sheila Jackson Lee. Joaquin Castro, Mark Vasey, there's, Eddie Bernice Johnson, Lloyd Doggett. You've got at least 6 Marxists in the delegation from this state alone, right now. And if you got Beto, you would have got another one. But anyway, so there's at least 100 members of your house who couldn't pass a background check to drive a school bus. There's at least 25 members of the US Senate in a similar position. How can you hope to survive when a quarter of your legislative body is working for the other team? So the FBI decides we better start investigating these congressmen because some of them are working for Iran, some are working for Cuba, some are working for the Chinese. We better do something about it because they've negotiated a nuclear deal with Iran. They negotiated friendly trading status, with China. They're doing all these things to bring us down. So let's go to the Judiciary Committee and tell Mr. Nadler what we're doing. Mr. Nadler, we've decided we need to investigate some of your colleagues, about 100 of them, for treason and espionage and treachery. Do you mind? And by the way, Mrs. Chu and Mr. Nadler, you're both on the list. Is that okay? What do you think's going to happen, folks? What's going to happen to the FBI's budget next year? People, they are not going to bite the hand that feeds them. So that is how the deep state is so deeply penetrated your Congress. Because there's no FBI back, the FBI doesn't dare touch these people, there's no background checks, and there's no media scrutiny. None. So you've got a quarter of your government working for the other team right now. Give you one more example. The head of the Homeland Security Committee, Benny Thompson from Mississippi. He's looking after your Homeland Security. He's all about chasing down white supremacists, all 7 of them. Okay? So he's out there now tracking them down. Well, Benny Thompson went to Cuba in 2000 for meetings with Fidel Castro. He arranged for hundreds of young Americans, many of them the sons and daughters of Communist Party members, to get free medical scholarships in Cuba for 7 years, folks. So we're sending all these young people to Cuba to be trained in communism. Now they're all over America working in our inner cities. And the man who arranged that is the head of the Homeland Security Committee, people. That's how deep this stuff is. The deep state is communist. That's what it is. And it's right through your Congress and right through your Senate and right through the leadership of most of your government departments. But isn't it nice that we've finally got a moderate Democrat on the head of the ticket this year? You know, Joe Biden, he got out there, he got rid of that crazy socialist Bernie Sanders, didn't he? You know, he's a good old-fashioned, moderate, blue-collar Democrat. We should be so lucky. Well, I'll tell you a few things about Uncle Joe. He was a 29-year-old city councillor in Delaware in 1972. He took on a 4-term Republican incumbent with an 80% approval rating. You'd think that'd be a suicide mission, wouldn't you? But he won. He won with the help of a group called the Council for a Livable World. You probably never heard of it, one of the most dangerous organizations in America. It was set up by a man called Leo Szilard. He was a Hungarian scientist who was one of the senior members of your Manhattan Project, the project that developed the atomic weapon you used to defeat the Japanese in World War II. And Leslie Groves, the head of security for the Manhattan Project, wanted to fire him because he knew he was a Hungarian communist, but he couldn't because he was just too darn valuable. Well, after World War II, Leo Szilard starts working for US nuclear disarmament. And he sets up this group, the Council for a Livable World, in 1962. And it was a PAC. They raised money to elect senators in very small states, like New Hampshire, like Delaware, like Rhode Island, because you can elect a senator in a small state for not much money. You get a lot of bang for your buck. So Joe Biden was one of their first. And but the quid pro quo was this: we will elect you, we will fund you, we will guide you. All you have to do is gut the US military. You have to work to cancel weapon systems, to negotiate bad treaties with the Soviet Union, Moscow. You have to destroy America's ability to defend itself from the Soviet Union. That was their job. Now, it was revealed in 1994 by Pavel Sudoplatov, a former senior KGB officer, that Leo Szilard was a fully recruited Soviet agent. And Beria, Stalin's secret police chief, commanded Szilard to stop spying because the FBI was getting close to him when they used to care about those sort of things. And he was instead to use his political influence to work for US nuclear disarmament. So he sets up the council. He's elected over 200 of your senators and 250 congressmen, all of the traitors who have worked to gut your military for 60 years now. And Joe Biden was one of their first recruits. And the man who actually recruited Joe Biden personally got him the money, got him the Democratic Party support, got him the armies of volunteers that got him elected, was a man called Albert Gore Sr. Some of you may have heard of his son. He invented the internet and global warming. Okay? Well, Albert Gore Sr. was a protege of a man called Armand Hammer. I'm sure a lot of you, especially JBS members, would have heard of Armand Hammer, the leading American Soviet agent of the early 20th century, the head of Occidental Petroleum, the man who kept the Bolshevik Revolution from collapse in the early days after, under Lenin. One of the worst traitors America's ever produced. And this was the man who got Albert Gore Sr. and his son where they are today, where they got to. And got Joe Biden his job. So Joe Biden owes his job to two Soviet agents. And he has worked to gut your military every single year he's been in service. Again, in the movie, I've got him on tape in 2012 at the 50th anniversary of the Council for a Livable World. You were with me from the beginning, Council. You got me elected. You helped me, you guided me when I was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. You helped Obama and me negotiate the START treaty with Russia, the treaty that was so good for Putin and so bad for America that Trump had to unilaterally cancel it. Joe Biden would be one of the worst traitors to ever serve in the US Senate, and he's the moderate Democrat. Well, Donald Trump said recently, he said if Joe Biden is elected, he will sell this country to China. And he could not have picked a better running mate to help him than Kamala Harris, who is also a moderate Democrat according to the Washington Post, even though her voting record is to the left of both Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. But Kamala Harris, she grew up in a family. Her father was a Jamaican economist. Her mother was an Indian cancer researcher. They were both members of the Afro-American Association in Berkeley in the early 60s. They supported Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. Two members of that group split off and set up the Black Panther Party, the pro-Chinese Maoist terrorist communist group that is the model for today's Black Lives Matter. She was a student radical at Howard University. She came back to the Bay Area to get involved in politics. She hooked up with a man called Willie Brown, who became mayor of San Francisco. And it caused a little bit of a scandal at the time because she was 30, he was 60, he was still technically married, and the tongues were wagging. And he gave her a couple of jobs that gave her $400,000 over 5 years for attending a meeting once a month, you know, that kind of thing. But nobody actually says what they should say, that Willie Brown was a militant communist his entire career. He was elected with the help of the notorious Hallinan family from San Francisco that Nancy Pelosi was a great friend of. He worked in the same communist circles that Dianne Feinstein got her start in. He was actually financed for most of his career by a man called Carlton Goodlett, a newspaper publisher, a Communist Party member, and a winner of the Lenin Peace Prize. And he was still openly sponsoring Communist Party events in San Francisco 5 years after his affair with Kamala Harris. And today, he and Dianne Feinstein are Communist China's best friends in the Bay Area and have basically turned over San Francisco to the Communist Party of China. And doesn't finish there. Her husband, Doug Emhoff, his law firm deals almost exclusively with Communist China, has Communist Chinese Party members on their staff. And Kamala Harris was elected to the San Francisco DA's job, to the Attorney General's job for California and the US Senate by a man called Stephen Phillips, who was a Maoist communist at Stanford University, a member of the League of Revolutionary Struggle, and worked very closely with Maya Harris, who was Kamala's sister. He knew the family very well. Oh, by the way, Kamala Harris's father was an openly Marxist professor at Stanford University as well. So her whole pedigree is Marxist. But so Steve Phillips got her elected to these jobs because Steve Phillips, the old Maoist communist, is a multi-millionaire because he married into the Sandler family of San Francisco that owned Golden West Savings and Loan and made $2.2 billion when they sold it to Wachovia Bank. Full of subprime mortgages, it sent Wachovia broke and they had to amalgamate with Wells Fargo. But they still got their money, and they put all that money, half of that money, into the Progressive Movement and the Democratic Party. Steve Phillips has earned himself top-level access to all the top Democrats. Obama, Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, he's right in there with them, right in with George Soros, part of the Democracy Alliance, that your big alliance of left-wing multi-billionaires. In 2010, Steve Phillips got $10 million together, which was chicken feed for him, And he did a big voter registration drive in 17 southern states amongst black and Latino communities, including in Texas. And that is what got his very good friend Barack Obama ahead of Hillary Clinton. You know, Kamala Harris is completely the Black Lives Matter pro-Chinese communist candidate. But she's a moderate, according to the Washington Post. So China is at war with America, both externally and internally. Now, in last year, President Trump put tariffs on Chinese goods. And Xinhua News Agency, the Chinese Communist Party news outlet, publicly stated China's response would be people's war against America. People thought, well, what does people's war mean? Like they're going to put tariffs on American products or something. People's war is a specifically Maoist term. It means every form of warfare short of direct military confrontation. Mao got it from the ancient Chinese philosopher, Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu, where he said, you should destroy your enemy before your soldiers even march. So what they're doing to America is waging war on every front to destroy this country, so when their soldiers march, there will be no opposition. Now, first thing, the COVID. This was purely by accident and coincidence, right? Well, look, this came just after Trump had caned the Chinese on trade. When he'd stood with the Hong Kong protesters, when he had backed the anti-communist candidate in Taiwan against China's favorite and won. The Chinese Communist Party was losing face. And the Chinese Communist Party's only 800 families. It's like a mafia. And they're only just hanging on to power, people. We've got to understand that. And they were losing face, and they knew if they had 4 more years of this crazy guy in the White House, their own people would take them down. They understood if they didn't take down Trump, he would do to them what Reagan did to the Soviet Union. But it would be not as pretty as the Soviet Union. They would be hanging the Communist Party leaders from the lampposts. So they knew it was their survival at stake. So we hear about the COVID in January. Just a coincidence, it's election year, right? When Trump's hands are really tied. So it's election year. We start to hear about the COVID in January. We know it was deliberately spread because every year in January in Wuhan, they have a big week-long New Year celebration. It's like a Mardi Gras. And Chinese come from all over the world to party up. They come from Texas, they come from Australia, from Britain, from Italy, from France. And they party up for a whole week, then they go back. Well, this year the local Chinese authorities said to the Communist Party, should we cancel the festivities this year? And the Communist Party said, no, they go ahead. So everybody came in, they partied for a week, they went back to where they came from, and bang, COVID was worldwide. Just like that. They banned travel into China, they didn't ban travel out of China, all through the early times of the COVID epidemic. They deliberately spread it. So, you know, normally when we have an epidemic, what you do is you quarantine the sick and everybody else takes precautions and you go about your business, right? That's how they handled polio. That's how they handled smallpox, malaria, typhoid, all of it. Way more serious diseases than COVID. But we were told we couldn't do it that way this time because the World Health Organization said there was evidence of asymptomatic transmission. Many people who weren't showing symptoms were transmitting, and as we didn't have testing, we're going to have to quarantine everybody. And so Trump was told by Fauci and the World Health Organization that there's going to have to be a massive shutdown. He was told there'd be 2 million dead if he didn't do it by the end of the year. And he knew that he would get blamed for every single dead grandmother between now and the election if he didn't do it. He had to. Forced into a corner. Well, we've got to understand that the World Health Organization is run by Mr. Tedros from Ethiopia. And if you look at his CV, he's a member of that country's pro-Chinese, Marxist-Leninist Communist Party. He's completely in the pocket of Communist China. And if you're wondering why people like Bill Gates and others and Bloomberg love Communist China like a chocolate, it's because Communist China is the model for the New World Order. Because the old Soviet style of communism didn't allow much room for their big business enterprises. So the new modern Chinese style of communism is totalitarian, a very strong party, the people are peasants, but there's still a place for big business. So the Bill Gateses of the world and the Bloombergs and the globalists, they believe this is the ideal model for the world future. So China is their enforcement arm. Everything China's doing is what they want to do to America. You know, the social credit score. Everybody in China gets a score. You know, you go to church, you get downgraded. You say something about against the government, you get a black mark against your name, and it follows you for your entire life. Well, they're already bringing that in here through our Common Core curriculum. That's the core of that, the seed of that. You know, this will extend through your whole life. So Communist China's the model. And so you got this big Chinese propaganda campaign to shut down the West. Well, recently Tucker Carlson had a man on his show, a man called Brian Dean Wright, a former CIA officer and a Democrat. And Brian Dean Wright said, look, I'm embarrassed about my party. My party is completely following the Chinese line over COVID. And he said, shut down, you know, they're pushing the shutdowns wherever you go. And Tucker said, well, why? And he said, well, some of them, I got to guess, are useful idiots, but some of them, I think, are paid Chinese agents. But why do you think the Democrats are going in with the Chinese line? I think there's two reasons. Because some of them are communists and traitors, but they all hate Trump. Communist China has to destroy Trump. The Democrats have to destroy Trump. It's in both of their interests to keep the country shut down as long as they possibly can to weaken Trump's chances of being re-elected. But there's an even more sinister purpose here. One of Obama's worst crimes was to gut the US military. He did huge damage. He cancelled weapon systems. Under his watch, your Navy was building 9 ships a year while China was building 60. What, to defend against Mongolia or what? What are they doing that for? And so, his horrible rules of engagement, negotiating bad treaties with the Soviet Union, all of it. Horrible, horrible stuff for your military. Meanwhile, Russia and China were building up like crazy. So Trump gets in, he realizes we're in big trouble. Our enemies are more powerful than us now. Our morale's low, and we're not prepared. So he changes a whole bunch of stuff, and he starts increasing the military budget. Just what he needed to do. But he can only do that on the back of a strong economy. What happens when your economy's in the tank? Already 31 Democrats, led by the pro-communist Barbara Lee from California, who's been to Cuba 22 times. The only one comes close is Karen Bass from California, who's been there 16 times and almost became Biden's VP. She was actually accused by the mayor of Los Angeles of smuggling Cuban weapons into East LA to start an insurrection. And she passed the Biden vetting process. What does that tell you? It was pretty passed with honors. So Barbara Lee has written a letter to your Armed Services Committee demanding huge defense budget cuts in the next budget go-round. Massive defense budget cuts. If they succeed, and Biden will abolish your intercontinental ballistic missiles if he is elected, your last line of defense, if they succeed, Who runs the world from that point? This COVID panic is a military operation to destroy your economy, bring down your president, and gut your military. This is America's survival at stake, folks. So when you take your mask off and you go to work, you're not just defying the local authorities, you're trying to save this country. We got to get rid of these mandates. We got to get the economy back working because our freedom depends on it. So we're just starting to pull out of the COVID, some states anyway, and we get hit with all of these riots, including in this city. Well, this is all because George Floyd got killed in Minneapolis, right? This was planned in 2016, folks. This was all organized by two pro-Chinese communist groups, the Freedom Road Socialist Organization and Liberation Road. And the head of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, Steph Yorick, declared publicly the day that Trump was inaugurated that their job was to bring down this president by making this country ungovernable. Her words. Well, in 2019, they set up an organization, National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, modeled after a group named of the same name that got Angela Davis out of jail back in the 70s when she was facing murder charges. And Angela Davis actually was at the founding meeting of this new group as well. His whole ethos was attack the police, police brutality, the police are killing black people. This was to propagandize that all over the country. Well, they knew they were going to start this in 2020 because it was election year. They tried to do it with the jogging case in Atlanta when a young black man was killed supposedly jogging through a suburb of Atlanta. They tried to do it when a young black woman was killed in Kentucky, but that didn't work either. George Floyd was just such a gift for them because it was right in their headquarters and it was so public. And the rioting was organized by a woman called Steph Yorick, the wife, no, it's not Jess Sundin, the wife of Steph Yorick. Okay, they're both women, just in case you hadn't made that connection. Okay, but anyway, I've got it on tape. I've got her, Steph Yorick, Jess Sundin boasting, I organized the first 2 weeks of the riots. You can't believe the joy we felt when we burnt Precinct 3. I've got this on an interview she gave. The rioting, she says, the rioting, the looting, the burning was an integral part of the movement. It was not innocent Black Lives Matter people being hijacked by Antifa. This is pro-Chinese communists declaring war on urban America. Freedom Road Socialist Organization, they burnt Minneapolis, they burnt Kenosha. They started the riots here in Houston and Dallas through their local affiliates of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. They burnt down, they attacked Jacksonville, Tampa, Miami, and Tallahassee. They did a lot of damage in Salt Lake City. They did a whole bunch of damage in the Bay Area. They just burnt cities all over the country. Pro-Chinese communists. The other group, Liberation Road, they burnt the rest. They worked very heavily in the South. They're very big in Tennessee, very big in Kentucky, very big in Virginia. They've worked to flip those states, which is why Kentucky now has a Democrat governor, North Carolina has a Democrat governor, and Virginia is blue. They did all that. Pro-Chinese communists did that by signing up hundreds of thousands of minority voters and have almost done it in Florida, and they're working in Texas through Battleground Texas and the Texas Organizing Project. And they're 1 or 2 elections away from flipping you if they don't do something real quick. So they're doing this. They're burning the cities. Liberation Road. They set up a front group in 2013 that some of you may have heard of. It's called Black Lives Matter. You know, we're told this is Opal Tometi, Alicia Garza, and and Patrice Cullors. They're just three young black chicks, and they're sitting around, and Trayvon Martin had just been killed in Florida, and they're just so upset about it, and you know, and the police are hunting down young black boys, and they just thought that we'll just start a hashtag. And it just went wild, and you know, it just went everywhere, and wow, it's the biggest movement in the world. We're so shocked and surprised. All lies. These three women are hardcore trained Marxists, all affiliated with the pro-Chinese communist group Liberation Road. They have direct connections to a group in San Francisco called the Chinese Progressive Association, and I'm just releasing a video about this tomorrow, which takes its cues and takes its orders directly from the Chinese consulate in San Francisco. And why did Mr. Trump shut down the Chinese consulate in Houston? Because they were supporting the protesters, folks, right out of Houston. This is war in your territory right now. And they're getting ready to do it all over again the day after Trump is re-elected. Their aim is to keep in the streets till he gives up and hands it over to Joe Biden. They're aiming to do a color revolution in your country right now, all directed by China and Iran and their friends, right now in front of you. See, this is the situation. Well, I'll give you another thing China's doing, and this is really, really sinister. Venezuela, right? 30 million people. They were the most prosperous country in Latin America. They elected two socialist presidents, Maduro and Chavez. Now they can't buy toilet paper. They're starving. And I think 20% of that country has left, and many of them are living in refugee camps in Colombia and Brazil. Prosperous country reduced to penury. Well, Mexico elected Mr. Obrador not long ago. They call him AMLO. Mr. Obrador is a Marxist, a hardcore Marxist. And he's now starting to implement socialist policies just like they did in Venezuela. And the Chinese are right in there guiding him. And Liberation Road, the pro-Chinese Communist Party, is writing in its publications that the Mexico is the key to the American Revolution. Because this is what they're going to do, folks. He is going to go hardcore socialist in a couple of years' time. Hardcore. He's going to impoverish Mexico. Where are Mexico's 130 million people, folks? Where are 20% of their population going to go to? Right here. Who would you rather have as president when that happens? Joe Biden or Donald Trump? Who do you think is going to protect you better? Because this is what they're planning to do, people. Does this sound a little bit wacky to you? This is exactly what they're planning to do. So this is so critical, this election. So absolutely critical. So here we are with China. They're stealing your technology. They're killing 30,000 young Americans every year with fentanyl. They are buying your politicians. They're buying your infrastructure. They're competing with your military and planning to kill your soldiers. They have wrecked your economy with a disease they deliberately spread. They're now burning your cities and getting ready to do it again very, very soon. But there is some good news. You can buy cheap toasters in Walmart. That's the deal that the globalist Henry Kissinger sold this country. China was nothing in the 70s. It couldn't even threaten the Philippines. So Kissinger comes along and sells Nixon on the idea, well, if we get involved with China and start trading with them, which the JBS was adamantly opposed to, adamantly, they were campaigning relentlessly against this. If we start trading with China, we can draw them away from the Soviet Union. We will introduce them to democracy. They'll come like us. What a great plan. And we will gut our industry in the Midwest. We'll send all our jobs to China, and we'll all live happily together ever after. What a fantastic deal. Now your industry is gutted. They're threatening to destroy you. They're burning your cities. But you can buy cheap toasters and cheap crap in Walmart. Pardon my language. Trump is going to decouple from China. The best thing that could happen, people, because if he does that and shuts the Chinese Communist Party out of your capital markets, you know, the other day, Mnuchin, that scumbag, was trying to arrange that US military pensions were going to be invested with Chinese companies. And only Donald Trump saw what was happening and put a stop to it. You imagine your soldiers investing their money in an army that's going to kill them. So Donald Trump has a plan to deal with China, but he needs to get re-elected. He's building an anti-communist alliance around the world right now. He's going to isolate China. He's going to do to them what Reagan did to the Soviet Union, only much better. And you won't have to lift a finger. All you have to do is cut off their money supply, and their own people will do the rest. And what a boon the world will have if you have a free China, folks. You imagine all that energy, all that enterprise, all that culture turned towards good rather than evil. What a boon that would be for the planet. We got to stop this idea of containing communism. You know, let's just stop it here. We won't let it go any further. Well, it always does. We've actually got to roll it right back, just like we did with Nazism. We didn't try and contain the Nazis, did we? Put a stop to it, and that's what's got to happen to the Communist Party of China. And that will happen if Trump is re-elected and he can get a sufficient number of Congress members and a sufficient number of senators to do the job he needs to do. You know, you got a president right now, if he's re-elected, you imagine him back with an increased majority in the House, an increased majority in the Senate, and a friendly Supreme Court. He'll be unleashed, people. Do you think he wants to stick it to the commies a little bit? You think he wants to dismantle their little empire? He's already working on it, folks, but he needs that mandate. Look, I know, like you, that President Trump's not perfect, but 90% of what he's done is patriotic and pro-American, and we haven't had that for a very, very long time. And that's an opportunity we should be relishing and doing our best to take advantage of. So this is what I'm saying, folks. We're at a turning point. And we can either ignore it and sell our kids into slavery, or we can seize it with both hands and do our darndest. Now, I can't promise the outcome. You know, only God can do that, people. But I can say two things. This is two possibilities. We could seize this opportunity with both hands, do everything we can to support the president and a freedom agenda going forward, take back the House, restore the Constitution, get rid of 80% of your federal government, all the stuff. We could embark on that campaign now, and we might do all of that and try our hardest, and maybe we still lose. It's always a possibility. But at least you will all earn the right to look your children in the eye and say, I did everything I possibly could for you. What is that worth to you, folks? But if you win and keep on winning, and that 2016 election convinced me that God is not finished with this country yet, folks. We keep on winning, we will spark an economic boom like you've never seen. We will spark a liberty boom, not just in America, but all over the planet. We will set the stage for a much needed spiritual revival in this country and across the world. And just basically, all of us will earn the right to pass on to our children not just the incredible country that we inherited, but one even greater. Is that worth a little bit of sacrifice, folks? Look, thank you very much, Ken. I'll just say, look, I've got some DVDs here, a few left. This will even convert Democrats, okay? And I've only got about 4 of those left, but that's the communist takeover of the Democratic Party and who the backgrounds of all the leading congressmen, even Amy Klobuchar is a Marxist, people.
Really?
Yeah, and little Pete Buttigieg. Amy Klobuchar used to go on bicycle tours of the Soviet Union with her communist father, worked with Democratic Socialists of America her entire career. She's hardcore. Mrs. Nice from Minnesota.
And you said little Pete.
Little Pete Buttigieg.
Well, I know his
Yeah,
parents were Marxists.
yeah, but so's he. And Julian Castro, out of the 11 standing at the beginning of this year, 10 were Marxists. The only one wasn't was Bloomberg, and he's a whole problem all on his own. Yep. Yes, sir.
Who is Jacinda Ardern?
Jacinda Ardern, much to my embarrassment, is the Prime Minister of New Zealand. And she was the head of president of the World Socialist Youth in 2010. And there's all these videos online, comrades, comrades, comrades. She's taken away our guns, she's taken away our liberty, she's wrecked our economy, and she's just got elected with an increased majority 3 nights ago.
What's the matter with the people over there?
Well, look, my people, New Zealanders are great people, but we've had socialism since the 1890s. We're socialists and we don't know we're socialists. We had a Fabian socialist prime minister in the 1890s. And we've had socialism ever since. And, you know, like our conservatives would be San Francisco liberals here. So that's where, beautiful country, wonderful people, politics would drive you crazy. Yep. Well, I think Trump will win the Electoral College, and he may just win the popular vote. I think Trump will win, but not enough of a margin to shut them up. So the bigger the margin we can make it, the better. We have got to, you know, there's going to be big legal fights. See, this is what the Chinese want to do. They want Trump, they would love either Trump or Biden to win in a contested election. Then you fight it out in the courts for 3 months. Both sides feel like they've been cheated. And both sides start going at each other. Can you think of a better recipe for a civil war than that one?
We already
Yeah, well, we haven't seen nothing yet. Yeah, you know, but this is what they are trying to do. They want to bring America to its knees by instigating a civil war here. And look, there's people out there who go, look, I can't wait for the fighting to start. Well, look, that's the most insane attitude. You know, the first civil war was fought was Christian gentlemen on one side and Christian gentlemen on the other. And that was brutal. You imagine what a civil war would be like today. The slaughters, the atrocities, the horrors. And if it looked like the bad guys were losing, how long do you think it would be before Chinese and Russian and Iranian troops were on American soil?
United Nations troops?
United Nations, the blue helmets would be here. And they would have no compunction about shooting American conservatives, I'll tell you that. So we cannot allow it to get to that stage. We have got to be very disciplined, very focused, keep it legal, keep it civil, but fight like demons to preserve this republic. Fight to the courts, fight through voting, fight in every way, rallies, marches, whatever it takes. But when we get into violence, we've lost. That's the horrible thing. You know, and I know it may even come to that. Who knows? I don't know. Sometimes your only choice left is to fight, and it's better to die free than live as a slave. But I don't think it needs to get to that. I think God gave us the 2016 election to give us a chance. I don't think He wants this country lost, people. The country that's done more to spread the gospel around the world than any other, has saved more nations than any other, spread more prosperity around the world than any other, spread liberty around the world more than any other. I don't think God wants that lost. If it is lost, it'll be our fault because we didn't do enough. Simple as that. So we've got to fight every step of the way. We've got to be civil. We've got to be disciplined. We've got to be focused. Fight every battle in the courts that we can. Win every battle. Keep public support up. Keep our morale up. Support each other. Keep our networks going. Just get through this. Because I will tell you this. Once Trump is re-elected and it's all settled, the gloves are off when it comes to the left. He's going after them. He's going after the deep state and the commies. and we're going to see you're going to feel a whole bunch of Schadenfreude when you see them in orange jumpsuits, people.
Against Trump. And that just flies in the face of everything I thought about the military.
Absolutely, you think the military is the last line of defense, the
Right.
super patriots. Well, yeah, the left realized that too. So they started infiltrating the Navy War College, the Army College. Look, you can go to those colleges and you'll get the same Marxist garbage you'll get at the University of Houston. They are indoctrinating these people. A lot of these people come in with college degrees anyway. So you're getting, the military is not the conservative military of the past. And Obama has fired over 200 good generals. Fired, got rid of them, and replaced them with Democrat leftist generals. Yeah, that's why Trump was a bit reluctant, I think, to go after the protesters, because he couldn't trust his military to do the job right. You know, so look, we got to accept that the military is infiltrated too. Now, it doesn't mean they all are, but it's not as reliable as we think it is. That's the problem. Yeah, well, that was betrayed to the State Department, the Institute for Pacific Relations. And look, the same people are still in the State Department today. You know, that's the problem. They were never cleaned out. McCarthy was right. The only thing wrong with McCarthy, he didn't go anywhere near far enough. That's the reality. So I want to say to you people, thank you so much for what you've done for America, for my country, and for liberty. God bless America. God bless Texas. God bless the JBS, and God bless all of you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ken. Thank you.